everybody, it is Romania Black, and we're on episode 18 of March Comes In Like a Lion, and I'll be honest with y'all, I couldn't wait. I loved last episode. Last episode was a roller coaster. Last episode had so much in it. It had so much packed into it, right? It was kind of insane, if I'm being honest. It had a lot of things going on. Me seeing Soya, starting this Lion King finale round where there's 7 matches, and we know now that Shimada's lost one of them, getting Shimada and the crew like practicing at the workshop, Nikaido giving these empowered speeches to Ray dealing with his foster sister, all this family drama. It was a lot. It was a lot going on, and I was living for it. I feel like March Comes In Like a Lion strikes this nice little sweet spot, right? Because you have basically a chill, calm atmosphere at time, but then it gets extremely dramatic and you're like, what's going on? So before we talk, I do want to talk about one aspect of this episode. I'm gonna have to pull it up on Discord because someone shared it today and I should have saved it and did not. But someone in the chat, I'm gonna give you all credit, whoever this was. It was, let me look this up here. It was Liam Poles was talking in the Discord, but Viri Amura noted that Noguchi, who is the one guy that was the Afterburner club president that was back a couple episodes ago, is actually a parody of a real life person, which is Hideo Noguchi, a Japanese famous medical researcher who discovered the agent of syphilis. I don't know what to think about that, but it's cool because if you see a picture of them, and I'll pull a picture up so you can see them there, it actually, the hairdo and the mustache makes so much more sense now. I'm like, oh, okay, that all makes sense. I get the reference now. Apparently, Noguchi appears on the 1,000 yen banknotes, and sometimes his name is used as slang for 1,000 yen. And I was like, oh, that's cool. Yeah, it's really neat to see the reference that's drawn there, so thank you, Viriamura, for pointing that out. I thought that was pretty cool to note as we dive into this episode. So yeah, those are the comments I got so far. I will definitely, more than likely, have comments next week to go over, but I watched episode 17 a few days ago, and I'm trying to record ahead, and I was like, I really want to watch a new episode, and I just don't want to wait anymore, so that's where we're at. But yeah, I'm really curious to see where we go, and I'm excited. So I want to give a shout out real quick over to Patreon, to my patrons, not only to thank you all on YouTube for subscribing, but also to thank Patreon and patrons from all the tiers for supporting, but especially for the philanthropy tier for coming out and supporting. I really, really appreciate you all. So special thanks to Alex Cornejo, to Anime Annie, to Be Happy, to Bryant Reed, to Dana, to Danger Zone, to Destiny Marie, to Davarin, to Danny Donmai, to Ichu, to Eric, to Ghostly Turnip, as well as Fisho, to Kiri, to Elfreya, to Lyndon, as well as Matthew Palfinier, Murphy, Nameless Monster, Nicholas, Sunspots, Trails, Shimayama, and Translucent Men. Thank you all so much for your support. I really appreciate it. All of my love. So yeah, I'm really excited to see what we're going to get this episode. I'm assuming we're going to dive more into the Lion King tournament. I feel like, okay, we're on episode 18. And there's 7 total matches. And I know that there's 22 episodes in this season. So we have 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. Oh, we've already had the one. So we could, if we wanted to, cover multiple matches per episode. But I feel like the tournament might take up a majority of this rest of the season. And I'm not bothered by that. I'm okay with that. So we'll see. But we're not going to waste any more time. We are going to dive right into March Comes In Like a Lion, episode 18. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1. And check my subtitles. They were not on, thank goodness. And let's do it. Well, so I actually want to start out this episode talking about the end card because I went ahead and looked at the end card for this episode. I'm going to put it up here for you all. It's super cute. I love the three sisters kind of doting over Ray and trying to get him like all settled in and everything as he falls asleep. He has a tendency to fall asleep in warm environments or in bathtubs, which we'll talk about that scene. But it's so cute and I love the animation style. And when I looked at this end card, I was like, I've seen this style of animation before. What is this style? And so the mangaka who created this end card is Ume Aoki, who, fun fact, fun coincidence, I just finished one of their biggest series, Puella Magi Madoka Magica. And I was like, oh, looking at you, Shaft, looking at you. But I was like, oh my God. So yes, so it's so cool. What a coincidence. As I finish the series by Ume Aoki, we get their end card and March Comes In Like a Lion. I think that's so freaking cool. But, okay. It does seem very doom and gloom for Shimada. I want him to be able to play in his hometown to get back to that moment, even if he loses, right? What I think is going to happen, and I could be totally wrong, I think, because he's lost 3 matches. If he loses the 4th match, it's done. Over and done. It's do or die next week. Right? So, do I think the show might have him be completely shut out? Yeah. At this point, based on what we've seen, I totally could see. Here's the thing. With Goto versus Ray, or the not Goto versus Ray, we thought Ray was going to make it past Shimada to Goto. The minute he lost to Shimada, I was like, oh, the trajectory of all of this season has completely changed. I thought this season was building up to the finale being Ray versus Goto. I thought that was going to be it. And even if Ray lost, that was going to be like a big moment. No, we didn't even make it to that. He lost to Shimada and then Shimada beat Goto. So the fact that the series let Ray lose to Shimada is like a sign, but then it let Shimada beat Goto, which was another sign. So it's like, okay, so what do we do now? And so now we have Shimada down 3-0. If he loses the next round, it's over. Do I think the series might do that? Yeah, they might. And it might be like this big moment where Ray's like, how are you not completely discouraged? You lost 4-0. And then Shimada can say, well, we just keep trying. And he gives him this big speech and all of that. And we nearly cry. Typical March Comes In Like the Lion stuff. However, I don't think that's going to happen. What I think is going to happen, he's going to win the next round. And it's going to be 3-1. He's going to win the round after that. And it's going to be 3-2. And then they're going to go to his hometown. And I think he's going to lose. I think he's going to lose at his hometown. And then it's going to lose in game 6. And that's going to be it. That's what I think is going to happen. And then he's going to tell Ray something about his hometown and about him losing there and about like something with his connection to it. I feel like it's going to go back to that. That's what I think is going to happen. Now, winning 2 games in a row when he's lost 3 in a row, I mean, my dad and I, we used to watch the NBA finals all the time in America, and teams coming back from a 3-0 loss to like win the whole tournament is not unheard of, and it happens quite often. So I don't know. Soya just seems so consistent that it's hard to imagine him losing 2 games in a row after he's beat Shimada in 3. But who knows? Maybe he'll be off his game. Maybe he'll be sick. But I don't want him to beat him just because he's sick. So we'll see what we do. I really like Shigeta and Nikaido's rivalry. I love that Shigeta and Ray are both our black-haired rivals to Nikaido, but Ray is so quiet and soft-spoken, and Shigeta's just like, what do you mean this? And has like Suda's gravelly voice, even though he's probably like 20. I think it's hilarious, and I love it. And meanwhile, Shimada's like, this room is rather small. Let's not destroy things. I relate so much to Shimada. I feel like I relate to Shimada. I love him. Every episode, I feel like I grow more and more close to his character. So we have, it's May now. So the games from May 2nd through the 4th are in Tokyo, which is where they are now. And then Nagano is the week after that. And then Tokushima is this place coming up if he makes it to round 6. And then Kyoto is where it ends. So yeah, I don't know. And maybe maybe he wins the 6th match and it's like a big motivator then. And then I don't think Shimada's winning the whole thing. No. I think Soya is going to win the whole thing because Soya is the man to beat. And I feel like Rei is the one who will beat him, but we are far from that. So I feel like Soya is going to win overall. But the question is now, can Shimada make the comeback? Can he get to his hometown? Can he make it to the final round against him or not? That's the big question. And I don't know what that's going to be like. So yeah, I like that he has this entire workshop room that Shimada has set up. It's geared. It's like, I imagine it's what Rei wants as far as a shogi room. There are shogi books, different strategy guides all on this bookshelf. There's a TV to watch matches. There's the game. Like, it's a very, very nice setup. And Shimada lives by himself. So, and he has his little cactus. He lives by himself with his little cactus. But basically, Nikaido and Shigeto have opposing views of how the game should be handled. I think it's interesting that he positioned the board to be in the moment where he started to lose or felt like he started to lose. To me, what Rei calls out is that moment back from his episode with Rei, I think it was episode 14, where he basically said he had been drowning slowly without realizing it. And then he snapped up back to reality and was like, oh, wait, what am I doing? And by that point, it was too late. And I feel like when Rei looks at the board, he's like, I realize this looks like the board when I snapped up and realized you were there. This looks like the board where it's too late. You can't turn back now. It's all over. And the thing about it that this show does really expertly is that Rei notices something's wrong, but because he's always been by himself, analyzing by himself, he's been able to, when he plays shogi, to like use his gut intuition, even if he can't verbalize it. And that's kind of a double-edged sword. On the one hand, if you have really good gut intuition, yeah, you can basically handle the match and not worry about it. But when you're trying to learn and evolve, if you can't vocalize what you're feeling and what you're experiencing, then there's no way for you to rationalize it, no way for you to grow from it. And it limits him working with others. So I like that Shimada kind of calls that out, and it's like, yeah, this is why this is like this for you, but it's okay. Where Shimada is like infinitely patient. Like, he's just ready to go. Shigeta and Nikaido, they're both so ridiculous. And the faces that they make to each other, like Nikaido with the blossoms and everything, and just like, oh, are you sure about that? You know, you got so much pride, but you don't know what you're talking about. I could so be Nikaido. I'll cosplay as Nikaido, as Femme Nikaido, and be like, what are you doing? Like, I'll just do that. And then I swear their faces just got more and more ridiculous. Speaking of Puella Magi Madoka Magica, speak of the devil, as the scene with Shigeta and Nikaido kept going and going, there are these pink and purple flowers blooming, which if you've watched Magi Madoka, there are characters that the pink and purple flowers bloom for. Is this suggesting something I could ship later? I don't mind shipping Shigeta and Nikaido. What's funny is, at this point in the series, I still ship Nikaido and Shigeta, Nikaido and Rei a lot. Obviously, I think the show has made it pretty adamant at this point that Rei and Kyoko are not going to be a ship. They're siblings. This ain't Game of Thrones. But honestly, for me at this point, I kind of ship Rei with Hina or Rei with Akari because both of them are kind of like concerned for him. So I don't know. I kind of feel because they're not biological sisters, they're just like taking him in under their wing, that there's more chances for him to end up with either of them. But who knows? I do love the flowers and the argument between, I love that this argument between Nikaido and Shigeta involves flowers going back and forth of all things. But their faces keep devolving further and further. And I love that we used the Darth Vader black cat on like Mustafar, and there was like Yoda. I think it was either Yoda at first, but then I was like, wait, is it Obi-Wan actually is the white cat? I feel like it would make more sense for Nikaido to be Obi-Wan. Shimada would be Yoda, maybe. But Shigeta being the black cat, I love that we use this vaguely able to get around copyright cats. I don't know what the back of the cat's robe is saying. The verb is chuckle in Japanese, but I don't know what the back of the cat's robe is saying. It's kind of like a gray cat, actually, more than a white cat. But they both tease each other. Their faces, though, as they argue one another, get more and more exaggerated. Especially Nikaido's where he's like, meh, like that. They look like South Park characters by the time Shimada's like, what are you doing? This is so ridiculous. Those faces were, I cannot. Like, the faces, especially when Nikaido's like, bleh, like, it looks like something off of Akira. What is happening? And then Shimada's like, can you both, like, just stop, please? So it happened in 45 moves, which the match being called in 45 moves, it doesn't seem like a lot to me because that's like a third of what 2 of the games have been so far. They've been 113, 114 moves. This was like 45 moves done. Like, boom, boom. And there was one in that little training camp thing that said like, it said checkmate within 7 moves. I was like, oh, that's super, super quick, right? They're like, once you've solved it, take your seat. So yeah, so then Shimada's like, what do you think about this? These 2 are too hot-headed. What is your take on all of this? And that's when Rei's like, it just feels disturbing. Like something was wrong before you even got to this point. And I can understand why Shimada would want to know what he thinks. Because Shimada, I think, might feel that Rei's maybe akin to Soya in a lot of ways. And he's like, okay, if I can understand why it feels disturbing, maybe I can plan for it not to happen in the future and I can counteract it. So it makes sense why he like spends the whole night staying up trying to figure it out. But like, dude didn't even put on pajamas. He like slept in his clothes and then he asked Rei to come over and he was just like a nervous wreck. I do love that he like has this little cactus. It's really, really cute. And he's like, you've studied alone, so you're probably not used to having to explain yourself. And he's like, why is it disturbing? And he's like, well, because you didn't move this piece. I love that Shigeta calls Nikaido a steamed bun. It's actually kind of fitting, but... And then Shimada's like, please shut up or I'll smack you. So yeah, he asks Rei to come back the next day. And it's raining, of course. I like the rain atmosphere for both days. And Shimada's just like, bags under his eyes. He's like, all I got's instant coffee and some milk, which he's kind of like Rei in that sense, right? Because when Rei has the guests over, he's like, I don't have anything to give them. And we're going to talk about that in a hot second. But poor Shimada, he's just like, I feel like Shimada's game day prep is to look absolutely miserable. In the one episode, he was like in the rain, Eurythmics were playing, and he was just getting in the mode. Here, he's just like head in his hands. He's just like, he's always so morose, like right before a game. It's kind of endearing. He just has to like, he has to whittle himself down before he can build himself back up for the game, clearly. But yeah, also brownie points for Rei for being kind and making him the drink when it's his own house. So he's like, one more loss and then it's do or die. And that's when Shimada's like, I really made a rookie mistake. I shouldn't have been wondering if I'd get to play in my hometown or not. He's like, that was arrogant and I shouldn't have counted my chickens before they hatched. And Rei almost seems to kind of realize like, oh, hey, I did that too. And it resulted in me losing. So he asks about his hometown in Yamagata and says, what's it like? And he's like, there's snow. And that reminds me of Soya, because Soya seems tied to like this snow motif, this quiet. And so I wonder if there's an aspect of Soya that reminds Shimada of home, which makes me want to ship Shimada and Soya an awful lot. So I'm like, imagine that. But yeah, it makes me want to ship them all hardcore. Because like, if they're rice paste, and Rei, honestly, in this moment, when we go back to the conversation with the teacher, I want Rei to like eat his own words and think back on them, because he's like, well, what's your town like? And Shimada's like, oh, well, there's snow. And he's like, well, what about when it's not snowing? And he's like, oh, there's some mountains and rivers and some rice paddies. Nothing, no big deal. And Rei says, well, but if they're rice paddies, that's not nothing. That conversation is going to come back up with the teacher. And Rei doesn't even realize what he's saying, that he's saying kind of the advice that he himself needs later when we have him and the teacher's name. But yeah, he's like, well, that's not nothing. And Shimada says, yeah, but they're kind of like gentrifying the area and they're kind of like taking it over and the rice paddies are depleting. He's like, it's hard to say this, but it's a place that doesn't want anything there. And I can relate that line, a place that doesn't want anything there, is something that I think if you ever grew up somewhere really rural, it's so relatable. Because yeah, there's parts of rural areas that they almost like discourage civilization. They just stay small and rural and remote. And it's like there's a benefit to that. And I feel like he's saying that like they're losing the rice paddies, but at the same time the place is like rejecting growth. Like they're removing the rice paddies for growth, but at the same time it's rejecting that growth. So it's like it's so fascinating to me. I love how he describes it. How he describes his hometown reminds me of my hometown. And I thought that was so beautiful. He says people and rice paddies, schools and homes. Yeah, it's all isolated. It's like everything there is just very, he's like, that's why. That's exactly why I want to go back. I'm so curious. I want to know more about Shimada and why he wants to return to his hometown. I want to know more about it. I want to know more about his history. I want to know like him and Soya came up around the same time. I want to know more about them. There's this quiet like nostalgia and ennui to Shimada, and it just makes it makes him mysterious and makes me love him even more. I love it. I love it so much. Also want to make note, his TV in his study room is bigger than the sister's TV in their living room at their house. So kudos for him. He doesn't have glasses, but he's got to keep that eyesight up for the shogi moves. Yeah, that's exactly why. So then we have like the match between them where he just goes all out and like his eyes like get dull and lose like the light in them and he gets like laser focused. And then we have like, it's like blood in the water and it's red. And then Shaft Studio just decides to go ham. It just decides to say, do you want this amazing animation between this quiet game between this man and his like siblings bestie? It's so good. There's gonna be a thumbnail from this scene for sure. It's gonna come. I just know it's gonna happen. Like the way that Shimada is animated with the waves behind him. Oh, and the way that Ray is just being slammed back against the waves and nearly drowning but trying to hold his own. Oh, it's so good. It's so good. And he's like, I nearly drowned. Speaking of nearly drowning, Ray wakes up nearly drowning in his bathtub. So this whole bath scene, I don't know if it freaked you out, but it freaked me out until I saw the slots in the floor. Because, one, it freaked me out because he nearly drowned. He nearly drowned to death. Two, before we saw the slots in this floor, I was like, turn off the water. Turn off the water, Ray. Turn the water off. Why are you wasting water? Why are you just letting it overflow? And it was like not only him wasting water, but then I was like, your floor is going to be flooded. That's going to ruin the whole infrastructure. But he has the slots in the floor where it drains out, which is incredibly smart. I guess it's a very smart function. I'm all about it. It makes sense for the apartment. But I was like, turn off the water. But yeah, that whole battle between them as Ray feels swallowed. I love that Ray is like, this is the difference between professionals and where I'm at. This is the difference between a C and an A ranked shogi player. He's like, I was struggling just to keep up. And he's worried about losing to Soya, who's stronger than him. Ray's like, I'm not even close to Shimada yet, but Shimada's going up against a man that I clearly can't fathom. Like, in hindsight, even if Ray had beaten Goto, even if he'd beaten him and moved on to face Soya, Ray is not ready for that. No. Ray would have been demolished, I feel, if he had tried to do that. But, yeah. I do like this show, like, when they portray Ray, like, pulling his hair back. It made him look, like, instantly 25. When he pushed that hair back, he looked instantly older. And then he's like, why am I aching? And I know that feeling. He's like, my shoulder and my eyes. What is this? Why am I exhausted? And I know exactly what he's talking about. And I think a lot of us can. Like, if you spend a day, like, being so intently focused on something or so hyper fixated on a certain task or objective, by the end of the day, you're just exhausted. Even if you didn't exert yourself, even if you were just sitting there, even if you were just moving like between a kitchen and one room all day long, it's still enough to make you like, oh my God, that was so much. I'm exhausted. Yeah. Yeah. I'm like, oh my God. It was the first time I was subjected to rank A player's thoughts for several hours. Yeah, so he's like, I'm actually, like, this is so good for Ray and great for his growth because he's been playing by himself. And it's one thing to look at strategy books and strategy guides. It's another thing to actually play the game and to be with an actual person playing and not just like an AI or something like that. To see an actual person's thoughts and strategies, it's a whole different field. So I loved this moment where Ray was realizing, crap, this is the difference. This is huge. And I'm hoping it inspires him. I hope it makes him inspired in that moment. But yeah, the moment we saw it drain, I was like, oh, thank God. Otherwise, I was like, Ray, you need to call somebody to investigate your bathroom floors. But also, turn that water off, son. You kept it playing even when you put back underwater. And so then we get to the point where he talks about how they're both professionals. And he's like, this is not a relationship where just one person is allowed to benefit. Yeah, because the whole point was he brought Ray to practice extra with him, being like, you figured out something that I haven't figured out, and it might help me beat Soya. So I'm going to take whatever I can from your advice with me to the next game. Meanwhile, Ray has something he wants to ask him, and he wants to get that answer out. And so there's this give and take relationship between them. And that feels like the heart of the workshops with shogi, is that you get something out of it. Everyone gets something out of it, whether it's learning a new perspective, whether it's getting an answer about why you play this, why you play the sport, whether it's figuring out how to beat another individual through a battle with someone else. There's something that you're going to gain from doing that. And Ray realizing that, I think, is so encouraging, because I think it's going to keep him coming back and not just practicing alone anymore. Right? Oh, I love it. He's like, until I get that answer, all I can do is hang on. I love when he does the all right. He looks instantly older. I don't know how I feel about that. I'm like, don't grow up too fast, Ray. And on the third match, after 113 moves, he didn't win. Oh, it's like, oh my God, what do we do? What do we do? So then we have him getting his report card and making it to the next term. He's got vacation until the next term starts, which I think is going to be the end of the season. Mm-hmm. So then we have Hayashida. I always forget his teacher's name because it's just a little bit too long for my brain. My brain forgets about it. So Hayashida, I love him as a teacher, honestly, because this moment with Ray where he wants to like have him go with the class to Mouseland, which is basically Japan's Disneyland, which I knew Japan had a Disneyland. I didn't know much about it, but a rival speech team, because I coach a speech team, they actually went to the international speech competition, which last year was in Tokyo. Hyper jealous. Our poor team did not have the money to travel that far and for that long. It was like a weekend competition. We were like, no, that's too much. And it was over our school's spring break. We were like, no, this isn't going to work out. But I was so jealous. They got to go to Tokyo. How dare they? Anyway, so they went to Tokyo for the international competition, and the other coach was telling me that it's just really natural for like people to like bring their kids to Disneyland after school and be like, Ray, go to Disneyland? And I'm like, jealous. Which I guess it's like that in California and Orlando with Disney World and Disneyland in our country. So I guess it's the same. But the principle, I guess the way he was talking, a lot of people in the area told him that people would get passes for the season. Could you imagine going after school just to Disneyland? That'd be so sweet. I went after school to like a pond and played in mud. Like that was my childhood. I'm like, you all got to go on rides? What? But it's just so weird in this series to see Ray having a completely different high school experience than the rest of his class. And it makes sense why the teacher is kind of friends with him, because he's like, Ray just has this maturity about him that these other kids don't have. And it's funny because when he's around Nikaido and he's around Shigeta, he kind of does have this like younger teenage adolescent quality to him, but it's not to the extent of like the kids going to the arcade or going on dates or doing whatever. He's like, he's in a different league than the rest of them. And the thing that I love that Hayashida wants to do is inform him that being in a different league, he's the one in the bigger league than them. Because Ray doesn't think that. When Ray is like, I squeaked by with my attendance, nothing changed, I didn't join a club, I didn't advance my rank, I've just been stagnant, I didn't do anything. And he's like, I didn't accomplish anything. And the way that the teacher looks at him like, hold the phone. Wait a minute. What do you mean you didn't do anything? When he says, what do you mean you haven't accomplished anything? I love this conversation. Like, I almost cried. Again, par for the course for March Comes In Like a Lion. I almost cried the way he described it to him. He's like, whoa, 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 whoa. He's like, you are confusing two different value scales. You think being like those kids is better than what you are? No. He's like, no. And I totally love the message that he sends, because I feel like there's a lot of people who have, and myself included, I mean, I did grow up on a farm. We did do a lot of chores and everything, but my parents, paid for my stuff and they gave me gas money, and I worked on the farm and I made money that way by doing chores and farm work. But like, my mom cleaned the house and cooked food and did all this. So as a high school kid, I had a pretty privileged existence as far as having a shelter and a secure place to stay, and didn't have food, inequity, and was able to like be sufficient. And that was because I had a support network with my family. And Hayashida's like, you are out here thinking that you're less than these other kids. These kids over here are privileged. They don't have to do shit. You're maintaining your house, cleaning it, getting your own food, making your own money, doing a job while going to school. You're on a different league than them, but not the way you think. You're in a better league than them. Like the fact that Hayashida's like, I talked up a big game when I was a kid and tried to be hot shit, but I really wasn't. He's like, I thought I was this big kid on campus, but I was like pretty sheltered. And when Ray thanks him, he's like, haven't accomplished anything? Do not say that. And he's like, I thought I was this big shot and I was just messing around. He's like, so don't tell me you haven't accomplished anything. You did your best. And the thing that breaks my heart, the thing that just absolutely crumples me from the inside out, is that Ray views this giant compliment, this big, like, sincere, empathetic, like, you did it, you're fine, it's okay, you're not alone, you are loved. He views that as a bad thing. And it's from all of this conditioning. And yeah, a lot of it is Kyoko. She's conditioned him to like feel like he shouldn't accept any compliment. She tells him all the time, she's like, you're garbage, you're trash, you're nasty, you don't deserve happiness. Like, she tells him that all the time, and he believes it. And that's what's so heartbreaking. That's why her character gets on my nerves so much sometimes, because I'm like, girl, you don't know the impact your words are having on this guy that doesn't deserve it. And it's just it just makes my heart ache so much for him when he tells him not to say it and he starts to cry. And the thing about it is, Hayashida, he's so considerate of him. He's like, hey, no, don't cry. And he doesn't try to like impute on his pride. He lets him cry for a second. He's like, hey, let's just go get some Odin, you and I, just some noodles. If you don't do that, we can go to Disneyland. And he's like, let's go get the noodles. And it's just, I love that the teacher like teases him. And he tries to prod him towards socializing. But the moment he knows he's gone too far, he pulls back the reins and he's like, oh, nope. Never mind. He's like, I understand and it's okay. I want to give Ray the biggest hug like that teacher and be like, I wanted the teacher to give him a hug, but I guess since they're teacher and student, it wouldn't be appropriate. But I was like, oh, I want that so bad for them. So he's watching the live feed. The live feed being on this phone is just, on this flip phone is blowing my mind. So it's day 2, match 3. Oh my God. All he can do is persevere. And Ray looks about as exhausted as Shimada does. I love that they're battling in yukata. That's so cool. Like, he has the green. Green's my favorite color. So Shimada wearing the green that matches his eyes. Beautiful choice. Soya's wearing the snow white. Also, Soya has, like, hot tea. Soya's like, bitch, you brought a water bottle? Soya is like, you brought a water bottle? Hi, here's my tea set. Like, what do you think this is? It almost looks like matcha green tea. I don't know if that's what it is, but he's bougie. He ain't messing around. And then the door knocks, and I cannot tell you the relief. We can't have Kyoko back-to-back episodes. We need a weekly break in between her arrival, right? So Hina and Momo came to get the boxes. And again, I felt so bad that he didn't get a chance to eat all their food. At least he got to eat some of it, which is good, but Kyoko just gobbling up the food that Hina made for him and then leaving him barely nothing. I don't know. I have a brother, and if he left me that, we would have words. I'd be like, what are you doing? So, also, we have Ray deciding what he's going to make for them. I feel this, and this is such it reminded me of this very random moment. I had a professor in college, in graduate school, that she lived by herself. She wasn't married, didn't have kids. She lived in this really cute little tiny, like 2-bedroom house with a 1 bathroom. And it was like everything was flamingo themed and like teals and pinks. It was very outrageous. And she went to a lot of conferences. And so she would ask me to cat sit for her. Now, she had 2 cats. If you're asking how hard it is to cat sit for someone, it is the easiest job in the world. Cats don't need anything. They have a litter box. They don't need you to do shit. She just wanted to make sure they wouldn't tear up stuff. So she's like, oh, I'll pay you. You just go over and, hang out with them for like 6 hours a day and I'll pay you. And she paid me like $60 a day. I was like, yes. It was the easiest job in the world. I just took my grading there. I was in grad school, so I was teaching a class while I was going to school, and I was like grading papers, watching these cats, listening to NPR. It was the best time ever. And one thing was that the point of this story is that when I went over there, she was very hospitable. She's like, oh, you can help yourself to whatever you want. If you want something out of the fridge to drink, you help yourself. And I didn't check the fridge before she left. I was just like, oh, okay, cool. So I went over one day, the first day I was there, and I was kind of thirsty, and I'm like, well, she did say I could help myself. So I opened up the fridge thinking there's like soda, some tea. She had 3 things in that refrigerator. She had a bottle of wine, a bottle of bourbon, and a jug of milk. So I had a glass of milk. I was like, oh. And when she got back, she was like, oh, girl, you could have just made yourself an old fashioned. And I was like, I'm not drinking your liquor. But I was just like, she did not have the existential crisis that Ray had while determining what I'm going to give these girls visiting my apartment to drink. No, she was just like, here you go. And I was like, oh. So I do like that he was considerate. Again, this episode shows that Ray is considerate. And the thing about it is, like with the conversation with Hayashida, when he was there talking about Nikaido and them, and he had this moment of being like, well, here's why we do things. And, Ray doesn't realize what he's saying and that he gets it. He doesn't want to admit it, right? And he's so hospitable and compassionate. You're like, Ray, you're such a nice person. And I wish you could see that, right? So then the box and everything, the multi-tiered box back, and Hina asked if he ate anything from it. And he's like, yeah, I got to try some. And he does get to tell her. So she came for the box. But I love that she drinks the milk like it's liquid courage, like she takes a shot, like before she asks. She's like, so by the way, which is so funny because my friends have done that too. We've been like at a bar or at a restaurant and there's like some dirt, some tea we want to find out, but nobody wants to ask. And so you like take a drink and you're like, okay, so let's talk about this. And it's like, So I love that she's like, okay, I have to ask you, who is she? And the funny thing is that Hina and Akari take it 2 totally different ways. Now, Hina, she was worried that maybe Ray was in a relationship with this woman and that it wasn't good. And here's the thing. We know nothing about the dad, right? So I was thinking in the moment, was she concerned that Rei and Kyoko were in a relationship and they were having this toxicity because maybe she's encountered that with her father. Maybe she remembers some of it. Maybe Akari remembers some of it, because we're going to talk about that in here in a moment. And maybe she was worried about that because the moment she finds out they're siblings, he's like, oh, well, we're siblings and we fight. And you know what that's like. And she's like, oh, yeah, me and Momo and Akari, like, we fight all the time, like cats and dogs. Oh, yeah. She's like, I get it now. And she's relieved that he's not in a relationship with her. And, of course, Rei is the nicest person because Momo's like, is she a witch? And he's like, no, she's not. And I'm like, you're a kind man, Rei. You're a kind man. But then they go home, and the moment she tells Akari that they're siblings, Akari's like, oh, that's probably worse. And then she goes back in there into the kitchen, and we get this little segue with Squirrely Teacher, which is so funny to me. Like, there's segments from Castle in the Sky. I haven't seen Castle in the Sky, but there's like segments from that. I've seen the poster, which is what reminded me of. And then there's like Rocky. And then that's when Akari's like, they've lived under the same roof for 10 years, for a decade, right? Since he was like 6 or 7. But when we saw them together, they don't seem at all like brother and sister. She's like, that's a problem. She's like, Rei. At this moment, she's like, that's why. At that moment, I feel like Akari has put together everything. She's pieced together. She's like, this is why you are the way that you are. This is why you've got some issues with relationships. This is what's going on. She's like, she's realizing all of the negativity surrounding Rei's past life with his foster family. And she's like, oh, this is why you're like this. This is connecting the dots. This is making sense. This is making sense. All this is connecting. I get it. And I think that she's realizing, because here's the thing. I think Akari's mindset was, if this was just a stranger that Rei was encountering, well, that's just a stranger. You don't see them all the time. You might see them on the street, but you can ignore those people and just leave. But when it's family, it's a lot harder. And sometimes, and that's why I'm wondering if she's thinking of the dad too, because if she's thinking sometimes family worms its way in and you can't do anything about it. And so I wonder if she's realizing that Rei's kind of trapped in this situation where this toxicity is just cycling and nothing's changing. So my hope, Hina's going to probably lay off because she knows they're just siblings, and her middle school mindset's like, okay, no, they're just siblings. It's fine. There's no risk of him becoming her girlfriend or her boyfriend, and things are still open for you, Hina, if you want to take a jab at that later on. But she's going to be fine. But now I think Akari is going to be like, okay, wait a minute. I think Akari is going to try to step in and help Rei find a way to be siblings with Kyoko. Kyoko is going to be the one that's going to be the hard one. And so Kyoko's going to be the one that's going to be obstinate and not want to do it. She's going to be like, now. She's going to be like that. And so I feel like Rei is going to, maybe Akari will confront him and be like, okay, here's what you have to do. She's probably going to be like, do you want to be siblings with her? Do you want to be her brother? And I could see him being like, yeah, I want to make things better between us. I want us to be siblings. I want that for us. I could see that. Like, Rei's a nice person. He's kind. He wants that family to get along and he wants to mend things. He thinks it's his fault when it's not really. But yeah, I feel like Rei will be on board with the idea of becoming a better sibling to Kyoko. And I feel like Akari's like, okay, then here's what you got to do. You got to stand up to her. You got to tell her like it is. You got to do this. And she's going to coach him Rocky style through how to become a better brother to her. And then it's going to be up to Kyoko. We're going to push the ball into Kyoko's court, and she's going to have to do something with it, which is terrifying because it's Kyoko. But yeah. And then that's when he finds out. Oh, his face when he sees the text about the match losing is so sad. He conceded the game. And then I heard a familiar tune broadcast to the town. Just like angst upon angst, saying it was a song Hometown. Oh, the angst. I mean, he's got one more match. He could win that match and win the next. And then be able to go to his hometown. But I don't know, y'all. I don't know. I don't know if that's going to work out for him. Oh, man. What a good episode. I'm glad that the sisters know the full story about Kyoko now, because it's going to set the stage for, okay, what do we do now? What moves do we make, right? And I think Akari could take Kyoko. I think Kyoko would be shitting her pants if Akari went after her. I think that's exactly what happened. I don't think Kyoko would stand a chance if it was Akari. But Akari is a cool head, so we'll see if she can prevail on that front. So I'm really excited to see the next match. I want to see, what are we building up? What's going to happen? I am so excited. So in any case, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe. Take care. I'm excited to hear your comments down below. And I'm excited for next week with episode 19 of March Comes In Like a Lion.